I just finished listening to the Anderson Cooper interview with the George Zimmerman juror, and just like I said, the juror had no other recourse but to go with the story that the defense had presented. She couldn't grasp a scenario in which Trayvon Martin would be on top yelling for help because the prosecutor offered her no other scenario. It doesn't even cross her mind that George Zimmerman may have the gun out and Trayvon Martin's holding his one of holding George Zimmerman's gun hand and hitting him with his other hand to try to make him let go of the gun. That concept doesn't come into her mind, and she's 100% convinced that George Zimmerman is screaming because he thought his life was in danger. Her answer was, well, he's the one with the injuries. So if he has the injuries, he would be the one who was screaming for help. Because in her mind, why would anybody who's not getting injured be screaming for help? And because the prosecutor did present her with a scenario in which George Zimmerman is holding the gun and Trayvon's trying to stop him from shooting him. It doesn't even cross her mind. This juror, if you listen to her, she insults Rachel Gentile multiple times on her intelligence, on her lack of speaking skills. Like Rachel Gentile has an underbite, so she has like a looks like a snout or something, and she talks like with a lisp, and she talks funny. This lady equated that with her being unintelligent. But if you want to speak on intelligence, listen to what this juror said when Professor X, I mean West, gave his knock knock joke. The reason that they didn't laugh, the reason that the juror didn't think it was funny was not because they thought it was an inappropriate joke at this time. According to her, they didn't get the joke. They didn't understand what he was talking about. Someone had to explain it to them later what he meant. They didn't even understand a knock knock joke. And she's talking about the intelligence of Rachel Gentile. But if you also think about that, if she couldn't understand that knock knock joke, and that knock knock joke was really a simple, straightforward joke, saying that you don't know anything about this case, therefore you're a good juror, that you don't know anything what's going on. But she didn't understand that that's what he was saying. So imagine this thing. Go think back to what the prosecutor did in their closing arguments. 90% of the closing arguments were questions posed to the jury. But if they don't understand simple joke, they don't even can't understand the basis of a joke, the logic behind it. If they can't figure out any scenario in which Trayvon Martin would be on top, screaming for help, you can't have them thinking about anything. They can't do it. You actually have to hold some jurors' hands and walk them from beginning to end. Because as you can see, based on what this lady said, they didn't understand anything. They didn't. It couldn't even cross her mind. Why would, under any scenario, would Trayvon Martin be on top of George Zimmerman, hitting him, and Trayvon Martin be in fear for his life? That didn't make any sense to her. Like, that's just a crazy idea. But then you just simply tell her, what if George Zimmerman had his gun out and he was trying to shoot Trayvon, and Trayvon was stopping him from shooting him, like trying to hold him, wrestling with him, screaming for help? She would have got it then. But the unfortunate part is you actually have to tell her that, because she can never, ever come with that on her own. She can never think that. And from what she's saying, none of those jurors could have come up with that on their own. They had a really simple mentality. Their mentality was George Zimmerman is the one who suffered the injuries. Therefore, George Zimmerman must have been the one screaming for help. Because why would a person who's not getting injured be screaming for help? That's the way her mind worked. And then you also listen to some of the stuff. She basically said, for the most part, they believed everything George Zimmerman said. They said his story was pretty. They said he fabricated. How did she say? She said he had some fabrications and enhancements, is what she called it. I'm like, well, we know he didn't lie about every single thing, but he lied about the stuff that mattered. The fabrication and enhancements came in on the part that mattered. Anderson Cooper, I mean, I know they mean well, but they should be asking her questions like, If George Zimmerman doesn't know he shot him, and he still thinks that Trayvon Martin's a threat, why isn't he still screaming for help when Trayvon, after he pulls the trigger? Remember, he said he didn't know he shot him. He thought Trayvon Martin was like maybe just trying to get away from the gunshot, and he had to run over there and hold his arms down. Why isn't he still screaming for help? They don't ask her those kinds of questions because she would have been baffled. I'm telling you right now, she would have been baffled on national television. Yeah, that doesn't matter. She wouldn't have understood. She wouldn't have understood that. She wouldn't have understood that if he thinks Trayvon is still a threat, why is he holstering his weapon? She would have never been able to answer those kinds of questions because those kinds of things never come into her mind. That's stuff that the prosecutor was supposed to bombard into the juror's head. Because as you can see from listening to this lady, they were never, ever going to come up with any scenario other than what the scenario you give them. That's why when the prosecutor told her, think about it. Use your common sense. I'm like, you lost your case with these people because they can't think about it. They have no common sense in which to use. Okay, according to this lady's old statement, she didn't understand. How did she say it? Well, Rachel Gentel's the language. She uses phrases. Rachel Gentel was using phrases that she had never heard before, and she couldn't understand what Rachel Gentel was saying. And that means Rachel Gentel is unintelligent because she's speaking in a way that you can't understand. You don't know what she's talking about. That makes her unintelligent. That's just like me. If I don't speak a language, that makes the person who's speaking that language unintelligent. I'm like that. And I mean, I don't think that I've gone back over Rachel Gentel's testimony repeatedly, and I don't recall her ever saying anything that I didn't immediately understand what she was saying. But the fact that this lady says most of Rachel Gentel's testimony, she couldn't understand what she was saying because she was using terminology and phrases that she wasn't familiar with. And actually, she wasn't. That's a racial stereotype that this lady, she saw and heard what she wanted to see and hear in Rachel Gentel. Because Rachel Gentel, she spoke softly because she has like I said, an underbite, and she has a lisp, and so she talks funny. But as far as what she's saying, she didn't say anything that people didn't. Once you had her speak up, she didn't say anything that people didn't understand. Essentially, she kept speaking real low because she was embarrassed by the way her voice sounds when she speaks. But this lady said, I couldn't even understand what she was saying. But that's not surprising that you don't understand what Rachel Gentel is saying. You didn't understand a knock-knock joke. So if you can't understand a knock-knock joke, you shouldn't be calling other people unintelligent. You should look at your own intelligence, lady, because the knock-knock joke was pretty straightforward. And it's unfortunate you just couldn't understand it. But this goes back, like I said, I knew that this jury wasn't going to get it because the prosecutor just lacked on so many. You didn't give them anything to go on. You gave them nothing to go on. This lady said that she believes the Sereno because Sereno deals with murderers and robbers and stuff, so he can pretty much tell if a person's lying. I'm like, are you kidding me? So if a police officer says that, so these are the same kind of jurors who, if a police officer gets on the stand in a criminal trial and says, I believe that person over there is lying, they're going to believe the police officer. They don't understand. Police officers aren't some omnipotent beings who have the ability to determine whether someone is lying or not. Remember, the stuff that Zimmerman said to the police officer didn't make sense to the police officer. Like going around a dark corner without your gun being either out or your hand on your gun. He asked him, like, you went around the corner and you didn't have your hand on your weapon or anything like that? And he didn't find that believable. He found everybody finds things in George Zimmerman's story not believable. They say for the most part, his story is the truth. I'll even give him that. I say 90% of his story is true, but it's the 10% that really matters. It's the another thing she said, she couldn't understand a scenario in which Trayvon Martin would throw the first blow and not be in the wrong. I'm like, how about this scenario? Why are you following me? George Zimmerman tells him to get out of here or something, and he sees George Zimmerman reaching for something, a knife, a gun, or something, and he hits him before he can get it out. Would he be justified in doing that? We know he had a gun. We know what he was probably reaching for. And either he was reaching for it or he actually got it out. At that point, he gets hit and a tussle ensues. She could not fathom that scenario. She could never come up with that on her own. The prosecutor has to tell her that because, as you can see from this lady, why would he ever hit him if he didn't hit him first? Because if I'm pulling a gun to shoot you, I'm not going to hit you. I'm just going to shoot you. So guess what? I'm always going to be the one, if I'm pulling the gun, who gets hit first. I'm always going to be the one physically happens to me first. And she once again she said, John Good, the neighbors, people saw Trayvon on top, so that means he was the aggressor. No, it doesn't. Not if you're wrestling for a gun. Not if you're wrestling for a gun. He's not the aggressor. He's stopping someone from shooting him. But she could not fathom that. She could not in any way understand that Trayvon could really be in fear for his life because George Zimmerman has a gun out and he's doing everything he can to stop this man from shooting him. That never crosses her mind. That never ever crosses her mind. And that's why the prosecutor erred. He should have made it. He should have put it in her mind. He should have made her understand that this is what happened. Don't go off Zimmerman, because we can show you 1,000 lies that Zimmerman told. Like, I never heard of Stand Your Ground, don't know anything about it, and the professor comes in. Yeah, we talked about that extensively. George Zimmerman aced that class. He knew it was self-defense, and we talked about the Stand Your Ground on a regular basis, because we applied the self-defense to the state in which you're living in. Blatant lies, man. I mean, it's blatant lies that this man is telling. Holstering your weapon, not yelling for help anymore. I mean, just basic, straightforward lies. But she didn't, things that she would never come up with, though. She would never understand he's lying. And she would never be able to figure out a way to determine that he's lying. And this is what this is the fair juror. I mean, I guess it's fair to Zimmerman, but it's not fair to. She's convinced that Trayvon did something wrong. She's convinced he did something wrong. She doesn't understand that if you're in fear of your life, some weirdo is following you, and you think he's going to do something to you. She's saying that Trayvon he could have just went home. So let me understand this. So if you guys, these perverts who hang out at schools and they follow kids home, you don't think it's weird if a grown man followed your daughter home from school. You wouldn't find that odd. Oh, he has every right to follow her. This is a freak. Come on, man. No one's trying to hear that nonsense. You see repeatedly people getting stopped, pulled over. You hear about it all the time. If a man is following your daughter in a car, then gets out and starts following her on foot, would you tell her to go straight home? Because guess what he's going to do? He may not get her that day. He just wants to know where she lives. Similarly with a rapist following a woman or anybody home, or a robber. Like, I'm not going to get you right now. They just want to know where you live, so they can, they know when you're at school or when you're gone. So then what they'll probably do is they go to your home and see who else is there, track it down, and then they know what a good time is to come get you. That's why you shouldn't allow people to follow people. I mean, just out in the open like that. That's absurd. And no one's going to convince me that they think it's okay for someone to follow their child around, a grown man to follow their child around. No one's going to convince me that they believe that. But this lady believes that because the person who was being followed around is a person who doesn't look like her. Trayvon Martin, as she put it, those people or them people, that's how they do it in their environment. She couldn't understand she couldn't understand Trayvon Martin or Rachel Jeantel because that's not the world she comes from. That's why she could never envision a scenario in which a person would physically be winning a fight but is in fear for their life. She could not envision any scenario. That wouldn't even make sense to her if you pose her question. Is it possible for me to be winning a fight, totally beating you, but be in fear for my life? That would she be like, why? Why would you? Because the person I'm beating has a gun, and he still hasn't let go of that gun. He still hasn't let go of it. He just knows you're going to eventually tire, and all I need is one shot, and that's it. And I'm going to win. This total outcome of this fight is going to change. But I mean, I guess she did the right thing in a sense that she's not required to come up with that scenario. That's a scenario that the prosecutor is supposed to give to her, and he clearly didn't. And as you can see, she can't think of any other way it could have been. I mean, that's our system. These are the people who are the jurors. These are the fair people. But it's just like I said, they were going to do what the evidence told them to do, what the prosecutor gave to them. And as you can see, he gave them nothing, and she came back and gave him nothing. That's just the way this works, man. That's all I got to say about this one. I'll see you guys next time.